Sangye Chedan Soki Chonam La Chanju Pardo Dani Kyapsun Che Thage Jinso Gibe Chonam Gi Dola Penjire Sangye Ndo Barsho Sangye Chedan Soki Chonam La Chanju Pardo Dani Kyapsun Che Thage Jinso Gibe Chonam Gi Rola Pinjara San Yendu Parasho Sangye Chedan Sogi Chonam La Chanchu Pardo Dani Gyabun Dage Jinso Yibe Chonam Gi Rola Pinjara San Yendu Parasho Simjan Tamje Dewa Tan Devi Gyutan Dembara Simjan Tamje Lungal Dan Lungal Gi Gyutan Tawara Simjen damje dungal mebe dewa tam minda warik. Simjen damje nyirin chadan nidan ta tanyamla nebara kyuruchi. Simjen damje dewa dan devi gyudan dembara. Simjen damje dungal dan dungal ki gyudan ta warik. Simjen damje dungal mebe dewa minda warikyuchi. Simjen damje nyirin chadan nidan ta Tanyamla nebara gyuruchi simjen tamche dewa dan devi gyutan dembara. Simjen tamche dungal dan dungal gi gyutan tawara. Simjen tamche dungal mebe dewa dan menda wara. Simjen tamche nyirin chadan nidan ta. Tanyamla nebara gyuruchi simjen tamche dewa dan devi gyutan dembara. Simjen damje dungal dang dungal gi yutang talwara kirchi simjen dam dungal mepe dewa tang mindal wara kirchi simjen dam nyirin chadang nidang tal tanyam la ne bara kirchi sajbe hoje choje me do jam Idam Guru Renamendala Ganyatayami.
Until enlightenment, I go for refuge to the Buddha, the Dharma, and the Sangha. By the accumulation of the practices of giving and so forth, may I become a Buddha to benefit all sentient beings. Until enlightenment, I go for refuge to the Buddha, the Dharma, and the Sangha. By the accumulation of the practices of giving and so forth, may I become a Buddha to benefit all sentient beings. Until enlightenment, I go for refuge to the Buddha, the Dharma, and the Sangha. By the accumulation of the practices of giving and so forth, may I become a Buddha to benefit all sentient beings. May all sentient beings be endowed with happiness and the causes of happiness. May all sentient beings be free from suffering and the causes of suffering. May all sentient beings never be separated from joyful bliss. May all sentient beings abide in equanimity, free of bias, attachment, and anger. May all sentient beings be endowed with happiness and the causes of happiness. May all sentient beings be free from suffering and the causes of suffering. May all sentient beings never be separated from joyful bliss. May all sentient beings abide in equanimity, free of bias, attachment, and anger. May all sentient beings be endowed with happiness and the causes of happiness. May all sentient beings be free from suffering and the causes of suffering. May all sentient beings never be separated from joyful bliss. May all sentient beings abide in equanimity, free of bias, attachment, and anger. This ground, spread with incense, adorned with strewn flowers, Mount Meru, the four continents and the sun and the moon, I imagined as a Buddha land, and by offering it to you, May all living beings enjoy this pure land. Thus, meeting the teaching of the peerless teacher is due to the spiritual mentor's kindness. I dedicate this virtue for all living beings to be cared for by excellent spiritual friends. Idam Guru Ratna Mandalakam Niryata Yami.
관계 도진이 좀 왔다 담제 밤배치를 담배치는 던도 고담때라 찾아로 야다 아란진진께 진진진기인데 다때 양양도 섬당거든 뺐네 전부 잡아래 가르제는 아주 대완되고 아래 동안되고 말해 대화대 아니 젬벤 장주기 셈 삼다나 대화 타르투도 뚝뚝 거래 내가 대화 좀 많이 봐 상기 고판도 두고 거래 녀몬 탐제 빵 두고 거래 녀몬 좀 많이 녀몬 자자베 아니 베 디마타모 시디대야 장주기 셈 아니 좀든데 동기 더벨 타와 냠는제네 땡이 좀든데 데니 빵 두고 거래 마다 빵 두고 말해 데니 디가라 자자 대화한테 규전되네 네 진den제 와야 둥알면도 왜 규전제네 둥알 장용에도 란진진 차디 거래 란진진들라 니 견도 타와다 빼미스베게 침부 차디 거래 와다때 장주기 셈 깨침부 인사데 다티니 셰구레스
And so it is very vital that we always keep in mind the faults and disadvantages of self-cherishing and the advantages of the altruistic mind of holding others more dearly than oneself. And why is this? This is because we desire happiness and we don't desire pain and misery and suffering. And so this mind of bodhicitta that focuses on others' good is the very thing that brings us the happiness which we desire and also leads us to the fruition of Buddhahood, while along the way also working to eliminate the afflictive emotions, these stains or defilements of afflictive emotions. So while eliminating the afflictive emotions, we arouse and develop the mind of bodhicitta. And this is something that is very effective in bringing about just that which we want. We want happiness, and this is the way to bring that about. And so because we want happiness, we practice bodhicitta. And so, in other words, holding others dearly. And because we don't want suffering, we remember to find fault in self-centeredness and self-cherishing. And so we can see that this mind of bodhicitta is incredibly important. So the holding bodhicitta is incredibly important.
왔다 문에게 전부 차여레스와 다토나 배 냠레즈드가 랑아주 다 이게 전부 쉬우지래데 너도나 아니 아주 낭줄들라 율군이 수투비 두바지 난거래 디게 겐제네 아주 동알지 장거래 라제 버즘비 진진되게 동알지 장거래 동알 장겐데 땡이래 땡님 라제 버즘비 진진 라 진진되게 땡이다 땡이 가르소리 땡이 집 답에 겐제네 아주 다 녀몽기 거라 녀몽이 레사때 동알데 띠기 거래 같이 마리바 다 율추톱도 나와데 시야 돈달라 덴델기 된 시고야 동반이 시고야 벤내 전부 잡아래 ran jinjing me so la changju ki sem be jempen changju ki sem de ani nyamni je de pe ne chimbu char de ni pe ni si ke chimbu cha bar es tar tu na luna tingi re da nyamni je ngoma de da yi ye la zon de pa mang bu yong ro wa da.
Mhm. And so this is really vitally important to our practice. And when it comes to the practice of the Dharma, although this can really be extensively elaborated, if we bring it down to its very essential, concise meaning, what just is the practice? Well, first we have to understand that out of conditions that arise from us taking appearances to be just the way they appear to us, we suffer. So we take these appearing objects of our perception to be true and real, and this causes us a great deal of suffering. Secondly, we come from a basis of self-cherishing. And so both of these things, finding truth in arising appearances and self-cherishing, these both bring us the conditions that lead to a disturbed and afflicted mind. Based on this disturbed, afflicted mind, we create karmas. We act out and create karmas that come back to us in the form of suffering. And so this ignorance of seeing outer objects and taking them to be just as they appear, we must understand that this is ignorance. This is not the reality. So seeing through appearances and understanding interdependence and emptiness are the two things. These two things are really vital points. And so within our practice, then we then defeat the self-cherishing mind with a mind of altruism, the mind of bodhicitta. And so when it comes down to it, among all of the extensive points and branches of practice of the Dharma, it really comes down to these two things: seeing through appearances and seeing them in their empty and interdependent true nature, and then developing the bodhicitta mind, the mind that defeats self-cherishing. It is just these two things that need to be practiced ultimately.
장주기 semji zimbeina 수수 karmanga chu chonga ni shu chu ni sum ka zhe ge wa zhe beina de top chumbu cha go re ni ba chen cha go re ani thomi cha wa de ji 장주기 semji zin go ya kunong 장주기 semji zin go tama muji ta gom ge cha ne ani ju de la ani be ngwas ya ho che go re nga chaina de ge wa de jom gu ma re 때마다 콘트롤은 좀 그래서 그상파게 저빌리오는 순수한 공고니 콘트롤 있게와 다도 아니 배게 와도 좀 그래서 되가라 같이 장주 가르소래 손음 쳐진 게 가와도 아니 뭐 맞잖아 아니 콘트게 난 좀 두고 와래. 손음기 속이 소수 누야게 가와 간가 퍼진주이나 다 동방인기 마진베 가와 간디지나 타나 동방인기 진베 가와 지나 딘좀 두고 와 말해. 대시기 속 두고 와래. 때마다 가와 간디지나 좀 두고 와래. 민점이 어떤 달라 가르잖아. 때 때마다도 뭐하지 거래. 뭐하지 샤이나 뭐하지 비고하든 좀 두고 와 말해. 좀 그리세도 뭐 맞지 비고하더래. 어디 인도가 내 첨보다 운동 아주 뒤에 간디지 주나 맞아 뒤에서더니 개와지 지겨래 개와지야 돼 민점이 사실라 딱 뭐하지 게 첨보리
Geshe-la, the parchin druk nyamlan chena dene
버진
tongni
주는다
ge tawa ani zina dene yeshegi
동리도벨 타와에 진데 다 동리도벨 셰럽기 진데베 냠렌데 이시기초
laso
많이
dene
받아 가리 버진 다데나라 출팀제 짐바제 저바제 되게데 소놈기 소래
laso
준리기 퍼진다 띵인진기 퍼진데 니가 임베 물을 자요 다데 따보타르게 나때요 너데게 나 따가랑 요래 대소 뺨미스면 내 첨보르다 가서 하고 가서 뺨게 첨보래
And so it's really, you know, so important as well that when we do accomplish or accumulate any virtue, whatever it is, whether we're reciting our prayers, whether we're doing Dharma practice, whether we're meditating, as it's said, that there are two crucial times in this virtue, creating this virtue, being involved in this virtue. One of them comes at the very beginning and one of them comes at the very end. These are really very like crucial times within the time span, the lifespan of that virtuous activity. And so what is that crucial part at the very beginning? That's whenever we're ready to undertake something that we really form a firm motivation for why we're doing something. And in this case, the perfect intention is the wish to benefit others, the altruistic intention, the wish to do it to be of benefit for others. And so it doesn't matter what, you know, if we're practicing then for 5 minutes, 10 minutes, 1 hour, 3 hours, whatever we do, influenced by the motivation, driven by the motivation for it to be of benefit to others, then this becomes a very effective virtue. It becomes very, very, very powerful act imbued with the desire to be of benefit to others. And then at the end, what is it that is crucial at the very end? It's then we take that virtue and we seal it in with a dedication. So taking whatever merit or benefit that was accumulated over that time and dedicating it to be of benefit for others. So dedicating it in this way. Then whatever we do, for example, let's say we meditate for a period of time. At the end of that meditation session, we dedicate that action to all beings. And in this way, then no matter what comes up after, this virtue is always sealed in. It will never be destroyed. It cannot be destroyed. Back in the chapter on patience, there was that verse where Shantideva speaks to the fact that in a moment of anger, the vast amount of accumulated virtue is destroyed instantly. So when we have a rising hatred and anger, it can destroy any virtue that we have previously done if we've not yet sealed it in with dedication. And so what we need to do is take that virtue, take the accumulation of meritorious action, and seal it with a dedication, dedicate it. And so we have the, for example, the practices within the 6 perfections. We have some of the activities within the 6 and practices within the 6 perfections are an accumulation of merit, such as generosity and discipline and patience. These, whenever we are working on, in the domain of these 3, this is an accumulation of merit. The accumulation then, or the perfection, yeah, it's an accumulation of merit. Then when we're working on diligent effort, our diligence actually plays into both accumulation of merit and accumulation of wisdom. And so whenever we practice any of the 6 perfections, however, whenever we practice any of the 6 perfections with the view of emptiness, they become an accumulation of wisdom. And so this, you know, and also then this, so then in dedicating it, this accumulation of wisdom as well will not be destroyed. So this dedication protects our accumulation of merit, and it protects our accumulation of wisdom. Again, those things that have been undertaken while holding the view of emptiness. And so we understand again, that which protects our roots of virtue from being destroyed is to dedicate. And so whenever you practice, then you don't want that which you've accumulated to be destroyed. So you then, you know, must dedicate.
What tendi ni galata also karin gawa chiti gala yonsu zoba muji de pi tapo ju cha kunlong de pi tapo tamang wa che ya pi tapo chen lu chen ta gawa de ta di kenchen ni kewa gyune nga so sangi san ro ti sung go wa tendi gala kaje gawa de ji sha gyo de 가르쳐래. 비다 보지 마주이나? 내가 알아서 내가 지잖아. 비다 보지 마주나 따따 니부 따따지 텐트구미도 좀 되대. 어떻게 내가 지잖아. 비다 보고 있는데 갔다 직발대 디디 초중래. 니부 비다 보고 있는 유풍 소바지 상구 가르대 내 전부 차디어래. 어다 때리 대인도가 너무네 개 전부 차디어래. 단당아서 실지 중대 개 전부 쉬우지리 대나니 any tape something you vajen nyamje che chanjugi sim lo jangya tape ne chesho de gan ngazu kechi shega chi gorwa.
And so then whatever good deeds we do, actually, we must see to it that we do them perfectly and fully. We do the actual activity fully and perfectly while having the perfect motivation, and then in the end, dedicating. And if we do it in this way, this will be the condition that is now set in place that will take us, you know, from life to life until finally reaching the state of enlightenment, the state of Buddhahood, the level of a Buddha. And so we call particular attention to the word perfectly accomplishing. And what this means is when we do an activity, we actually, perfectly do it. Whatever work we do, even when it comes to like a worldly work, if we don't pay attention that we're actually doing it accurately, fully, correctly, perfectly, we know in the end it doesn't turn out right. So there is a way to do something like following proper protocol, like SOP, standard operating procedure. So we don't leave out any steps, we don't skip anything, we don't we're not lax about just getting it done. We really accomplish it perfectly. So within the Dharma, if we, just like within our worldly activities and work, if we want the result to be outstanding and perfect, then we have to put into play the cause that will then lead to that result. And the cause, as we've said, are within these 3 steps, as well as having the proper motivation and dedicating it at the end, is to really follow all the steps and really pay good attention to do it perfectly. And so now in this text, the Way of the Bodhisattva that we are currently studying, which is within all of the scriptures and texts, really a very important, essential text. And now we find ourselves in the 8th chapter, which is dedicated to equalizing self with others and exchanging self and others, as well as training in arousing the mind of altruism, bodhicitta.
Wata daje nyamje di je tsarne ani joro nyam sulen bese simong de je patala sabje jiebe nane ta ngazo kare gopa de rotsare ani random baji jorwa nimi den rotsare so ranchin di shu chumbu jena kyon kare wada den rotsare ta lugi nyepala ta paasi ta sisi lula yani lui ta lui le mini yani be chadang kina di hyunde kare yoreze de kazan di chimbarwa wata di subject di tosu deshe de gyan ta kerse je kwa de ke chimbore lui ta lui ki nyepala ta baase de lui hyun lui le tenne ta ngazo migo asana di hyun chabarwa lui le tenne wata di jigyo mares yang lui ene be mogo dan lui ene be chatamjeni hyun reze de le go marta de yang hago kwa de ngazo gonana gomen za udo lui nana menteng udo de zo hago be ke chimbore kanche ran jinjin wang ge jene ran je prinzimi jinjin wang de jene lui ene be 하장 제대 첨부전에 아니 차배 윤르지 차 아니 도스전에 이 네파 사이나 경경게나 어떻게 용주기가 말했지 딜라고 거래 아니 류일에 미네는 배 도바 첨부된데 기어 말은 도발은 오미야요 말은 도발 타요 말에 도중 초세제 거래 제대 순고를 인주 도바 중지 초세받을 제과데 빼면서 깨진 버리지 다 뭐마됐다 sabjete 나라 돈다 돈나 오다 텐디시 중고를 대패게 침도와 윤도 간제 취럽도 남자기 시랍기 랭인 집이 시랍기 예체네 니제나 마 중알 장기도 디지기르민도 오다 장주기 셈게 랍자당 갈기도 디지기민도 세트다티 다다 정어서 삼로 코르고 투구구도 오다 때리
And so recently in the categories and classification of what we have been studying is, now that we have understood and are practicing equalizing ourselves with others, and now that we are also practicing and understand the trainings in exchanging our self-cherishing for others or other cherishing. Now, how do we actually, what's the practical application here? What are the practices on our day-to-day situations that we need to look at that accord or don't accord with the trainings? So we've already looked at the downfalls of our wants and needs. We've looked at the downfalls of being very self-absorbed and basically just accomplishing our own desires. And we have then looked at picking up the practices of accomplishing others' benefit. And now we're looking at the faults that occur due to having a physical body. So related to this physical body, what are some of the ways that we engage with the world that actually are faulty, that bring us difficulties and suffering? And so that's the one we have most recently been looking at. And this is that due to having a physical basis, we act in ways actually where we get very desirous and attached, fixate and obsess over getting things that, you know, related like to the body that please us, and all the faults that come from this, and recognizing those faults. And so that's why this kind of subcategory is called identifying the downfalls that come due to physicality, due to this body. And we identify them as downfalls, as actually in the end they bring us things, it brings us things that we don't want. And so, you know, we look at this from the point of wanting and attachment, being compulsive, being, you know, fixating or obsessing over wanting something or getting something. But we also need to understand that not everything related to the body needs to be seen as a fault or something negative. The body does have needs that we will, you know, that are it's perfectly acceptable to take care of those needs. For example, because we have this physical body, sometimes we get a headache, and so we need to take, you know, medicines to make, you know, a headache feel better. So we must understand that, you know, it's not everything related to physicality is a downfall or negative, but there definitely are some things. And one thing in particular that we look at is when we fall under a sway of egocentricness and selfishness due to this body. We want something. We want it now, we want more of it, we want that object that we want to indulge in. And then in the end, actually, we end up accumulating fault, accumulating negativity. It's due to this great wantonness, this greediness, a compulsive and an obsession that really grows. It grows in a way that there is no end to our hunger. It's a hunger that can't be quenched. Because wanting in itself can't be quenched. So the object, once we get the object of our wanting, there's no satiation. And because there is no end to this wanting, what we must learn to do is cultivate a sense of satisfaction, a sense of contentment. And not only that, to actually go about in a way where we have little wants. And so there is this saying, which is to want little and to be content with whatever there is. And to develop such an attitude is just such a vitally important part of this process of heading off like our greed and compulsiveness at the path. It really thwarts, this. And so we must, when it comes to training the mind with the Dharma, we must use our intelligence. We must use our brain. We must use rational, like practical thinking. For example, we could look at ourselves in a situation and then see ourselves in the middle of the throes of, the waves of wanting and desire and compulsion, and say, what am I doing? This brings me pain. Don't do this. Or, oh my goodness, this is like totally in contradiction to the Dharma teachings. I shouldn't do this. And so we need to think like this as well in a very practical way when it comes to these things.
어다 니바데 다 초미시비 니바데는 경유변은 니바데 디레 류레 차들 오므리 바스 류레 차들 다 초미시비 용야데 깽음마드란 란진징이 쟁고르와 란진징이 란진징이다 나가 님도 슈슈모여다 다 초미시비데 레고레 다 차들 오므리즈다 너바 추인 초시바 제고레스 너바 충신 초시베잖아 경 펜도가래요 그러더라 아니 다 그와 풍숨서 봐 소소 에 된디 집에나 다 이게 진진진 카타는 것도 또 얘네 펜바다야 돼 죽은 것도 된디가라 아니 배 풍숨서에 연된 탐제딘이 더 그래스 된디가라 즉 류라 파기 차바케기 유들라 꾼들다네 아니 도바충지 초시바데 제네 아니 연된 풍수소바 내야지 제거래 자다테슨 거래.
And so we have also in the most recent verses looked at a state of unfulfilled wanting, of never being content, and what the desires and what we become physically addicted to and wanting of, how actually we then find ourselves in a cycle of discontent. We're never contented. It's never enough. And actually, from what condition did this arise, this inability to be fulfilled and satisfied with just this endless hunger and thirst? Well, it really started back with self-cherishing, with really fixating on like wanting to please one's dear self, one's precious dear self, this I need this, I want that, and then it's not enough for me. Then we become non-contented. And so this is the state that we find ourselves in. And so then the trainings are then to rather turn to a new way of being, of someone of little wants and someone who is easily satisfied, easily contented. And so what are the qualities in this? Where will this get us? What will this bring us? Actually, this is the basis for accomplishing. Remember, we mentioned that perfect, like perfect virtue. When we accomplish a perfect, an activity perfectly, it's perfect virtue that brings us this perfect result. Well, we can't do that with a mind of self-cherishing and a mind of, coming from an agenda, self-agenda. But we can get there from being someone of little want and someone of complete contentment, no matter what there is. And so we have now taken up this new mission, and we also are ones who our mission is to accomplish others' benefit, to go out there and be people of goodwill and serve humanity. And that equates to this perfect fulfillment of perfect qualities and benefit and results, because an attitude such as this affects the situation in a way that brings about this full and perfect results and qualities. And so what it is that we must identify is, what are the objects of our obsession? What are we addicted to? What are we attached to? What is it that we find that, we have no willpower to resist? We find those objects and we identify them, and we see fault in that whole process. And now, in taking up this new mission of being content, satisfied, wanting little, and focused on others, we are now focused in the direction of this perfect, fulfilled virtue.
하트는 성근데 캐시 리디션에 텐데시 레스로와 다 드린 로야데 요함에 빙에 바스다 다티 디레다 루기니 발라 타발로 처음이 빙에 바다 요함에 빙에 바 몽빙에 바 숨여베 나네 다 니바 요함에 빙에 바드레 류레 다 쇼로가 전에 쇼로가 야당 든지 땡게 받으래도 땡게 받아 덩구반이래 쇼로가 니우도 오늘 말아서 윤도 가서 리드 라진데 질 따오라
루기 랑신
루기 라진잖아 류 코랑게 다 밖에 닝부연매다 류 코랑데 장인 간지미데 야고 제집조가다 빼미스베 깨침버려 그래도 맞을 때 제집 맞아 인자 아니 라 진진시 수천에 류라 하장기 제대 지연디가라 아니 고 리딩 nembe랑서 작은 지금 거 용거로 와 어떻게 리데 뭐네잖아 리데 꼴주제네 리데 타는 소남다 이식이 초산에 생기 산도에서 저기나 답에 야조가 둘러가는 나지 루이디 생기 산도에 두징도 붙여가도 대 맞잖아 루이디 꼴주제 마시베이나 루이디 답에 nembe랑서잖아 되니베 리디기 깬제네는 ngarding 슈처로 용야기 깬지기도 왔다기 그 가장 걸은로서 미 둘라 때나니 미 둘라 때나니 가라 미 둘라 때나니 미 둘라 때네 미 루iten데 두징 타블레 페이잖아
라서
둔디 신이 녀가왜 몸베트스 니말로 생지와 가장 걸은로서 답니 루iten데 양양도 더비야 빼 가버렸어. 제가
가리 가버리?
미 루iten데. 미 루iten데 양양도 더비야 가버렸어. 가르사 미 둘레테나니. 어디 디버도 유랑 인디 다고 쇼로가 빠져래도.
And so now we'll examine this physicality and the downfalls of the physicality from three different standpoints. The first one being the inertness of the body, or examining it from that perspective. And actually, one thing that we must do is take a serious look at the actual physical matter of this body. Really look at what is the actual nature of this body, essentially. And if we look at it in its as either being fine and wonderful, or not so fine and perhaps even distasteful in some ways, we we can examine the body. If we examine the body closely, what we're going to find is a lot of physical matter that might fall into that second category, as not so, tasteful, not so fine and wonderful. But then again, although, the physical matter of this body, we might be able to see in that way. But in actuality, we also recognize that it's through our physicality, through having this body, that we are able to conduct ourselves in ways that are meritorious. And therefore, we can accumulate the merit. We can have accumulations of merit, and we can also have accumulations of wisdom. And these together lead to us being able to become enlightened beings, to us being able to become Buddhas. Just like all streams lead to the ocean, this body is seen almost like a vehicle, like a boat, we could say, like a ferry that will bring us from one place to another. And so we are being ferried, this body is a vehicle that acts to bring us to enlightenment. And so this is something that we need to also understand. It's very easy for us to get caught up in that first kind of, physicality, and maybe finding something wonderful about this body in a way that would lead us to having, being very self-identified and self-clinging. But if that's the case, then it's not the vehicle that's going to bring us to our desired, end of enlightenment. Earlier, there was a verse, and Geshe-la is just looking up the number, the verse number, that speaks to this.
Mi tula thene lungal chu chile tolas lungal chambul tol tugres mi tula thene tundi chini nyekawe mongbeta su nimalos
Somebody sikang sumpa yankyo
tundi chini nyekawe mi luthende chin jema yang to toya khabures tundi chini nyekawe mongbeta su nyamalo tanda tobe kaptala nimalo jeni tate pecho yahuji tangore la gore.
Okay, so sikang shipa di yankyo
tundi chini nyekawe mongbeta su nimalos
mompe
ni mishiba mongpa chene be kaga mashiba chene degio mares nilon degio mares ni be ti hago chene ngun tudi ya mi luisen di za chimbu ba hago che gore la gore ti don sangi san roe ba she gore la gore ke chimbu do si di pe jurbu do mi tula fenani lungal chu chele tul tundi chine nyekawe mongbeti su nimalos ngone ti chik samtang ida kala semna chik dua yungu dua dak ngaran su kanga chik bare mi luisen de haja luisen rimbuchi de tele sene nyepa sagyo mare tele sene de gawa sagore ota te sungware.
And so within this verse, it speaks about this physical body as being, like the basis of reliance, and how actually difficult this is to attain again, to attain a physical, like human existence, a human body. So in this verse, which Geshe-la says he doesn't have the number, but he has memorized the lines. And so here is what that verse says, is that this precious body of reliance, like this vehicle, this precious body of reliance, is a form that can that can liberate us from our suffering. And to once again attain this basis is incredibly hard. So don't waste this precious body through like sleepy ignorance. And so what this means is it's just as we said, it's identifying this body as something really precious and really sacred. And that's important to know, that actually it is this body that through having, this physical body, that we can know enlightenment, that we ourselves can know enlightenment. And this is really important, to identify, we can use this body for enlightenment. It is difficult to attain a physical human body, and therefore don't waste the opportunity. And so these lines are really quite beautiful and really very moving. And as as I mentioned earlier in explanation, that we should use our time and our physical body for virtue, towards the virtuous side of what can be done and connected with the human body, rather than with the non-virtues that can be connected.
Yeah, that Ramasam.
Oh, okay. And Yeshua says he hasn't found it, but in any case, he also mentioned that we are starting up again where we left off. We finished on 177, and we'll pick up on verse 178, and again, that's in the 8th chapter.
What muni shigwa the Karzana, Ranchi Wangijinde, Luthen D. Tony, Migoji Sayajin Yungore, did the gun race. Did you amaris? Tordaduna? Luthen D. Tony, any Gavaja Sayare, the Chunjina, the best Sani, the Lude and Pay, Kulchu Jenny, Gavasani, Sangi Sandro, Tapshi Chores, don't that they love God.
So basically, what we can understand about these two sides, these two possibilities that we can use this body for, based in strong self-identity and self-cherishing, it is non-virtue will play out, and that's a fault, and we shouldn't do that. And then again, based on this physical body, we can urge it on to virtue whenever we can. Urge it on to virtue, and that's what we should do.
Dang, green, you had the army being nearby. Solo get gathered, don't you? Don't get the dung with the Ta Tamar Talvi. Dushiki, Miojengi, Gyojawa, Misa, Zuni, Mizepe, Dilaji, Vatunsin, Sida, that Luki Rajin the Shegada, Luki Rajin the Maranzo Louis Crambo, Coralata, Srawazeke Omara, Lizana, Zu Chadro, Zu Pumpo Chadro, Zubun Chadra, Dila, Nipe, Tama the Ku, Southern Rally on the Gala, Uko. Shinro Rocha Gore, and it didn't metagia Saoloju, cook the Nichesha Goro. That Tutuji, Miojengi, Gyojawa, Mizan Luni, Mizepes, Mizan Lui, that Kazangaman Dosan, Bio Liudan, and Isabelio Conal, Mizan, they sum sudu Gudani generis, on it the Kazan Vajan Jebek of Zola, Drosoma. What are the good some tangor, Mizanwa? We any gu on Misawa, Mungoni Misawa, Divu Misawa. They do something good.
Okay, dribble, you dang contact.
You pame kuta lutum de genwa. And more than that, any pay co carsore, teeth and any pay dungal jembar chigido tamman dibude dungal gi rajin chinji chagorwa wata tegite samtang gore 미세벤 딜레치 치르다든 텐디 인디가라 콜라니 베 하장 지지지다 단진 제요 말레스 손남야네 시앙라 달라 투군 디치자 본소 디케 지에나 기 나갈 셀미자 세 스무도 다 가르소레 소남야니 시안라에 다 미상의 출고 미상의 출고 차디어로 왔다 뭐는 미상의 출고 레도아 자야디 미상의 미상의 배 두스 꼬레게거나 대야 미상의 진가서 양출로디온 두스 꼬레게거로 출고는 꼬레게나 진가기도 어떻게라 거래 된디가라 다
Ani gesula kare ani korwa gap dene kewa di dang kewa jema
어다이 미상 류리 양양도 놀렌 지거와
re okay
어다 때쓴 거래 답 본소 니케 지에나 아니 다에 기후 나갈 셀미자시 숭도 근데 네가 류리 Pomala sopi ludi o sepa misepa kido sepa da ne dochala sopa misepa ji kigo ro semla mispe thro mangbo chadang musum kigo ro lule tene tije ne pe tiro dungal tengo te khachina ma so selgo maris tir selgo ures meazo ures ta tharthuna ran chinjin de meazo zona tin dibuta ta nyoe yo mare ta ni tartuna ranchin din mea zoe ji sungore
And so here in next we'll look together at verses 178 and 179. And first 178, dust and ashes are the body's final state. This body, which, inert, is moved by other forces. This form so frightening and foul, why do I regard it as myself? And so this is very true about the nature of our body. Just look at it. First, within all the aggregates, we identify this. This is the aggregate of form. It is form. It is an aggregate of material form. That when separating, at the time of death, when separating from the life force, becomes a corpse that is burned and then turns in the end. However, this corpse just turns to dust. It turns to ash. And so that is the very nature of what this actual body is. And not only that, here it says, this form so frightening and foul. Also, this word can be translated as unclean, impure, filthy. And we looked at that earlier when we were studying the trainings on equalizing self and others, when we really explored looking at the actual makeup of what, is this very body. It is unclean. It is full of unclean substances. Actually, it is unclean and foul from the perspective of both cause, essence, and result. We looked at that. We looked at the cause. Where did this, the causation of this body? It came from sperm and ovum. It then is, in its very essential nature, the essence of suffering, and actually as well the result that it then brings to us as well is the nature of suffering. And also, and so this is foul. And so why, it says here, so why do I regard it as myself? For regarding it and really identifying with a sense of self, again, brings about self-fixation, egocentricness, self-clinging. And in the next verse, alive or dead, what difference does it make? What use is this machine to me? What difference will divide it from a clod of earth? Alas, that I don't rid myself of pride. And so it's seen as this machine, this unclean machine. And, you know, that is the case. This is an aggregate of form, and that we have in this life that, you know, has, you know, it's this anatomical form, that we have this life, and that actually, you know, cyclically we'll have another machine just like this, another mechanism just like this again and again. When we go from life to life, we take on again another form, another machine. And as it said, what difference will divide it? What difference will divide it from a clod of earth? Alas, that I don't rid myself of pride. And so from, you know, we have the link of becoming. And so we have craving and becoming. And through becoming, actually, or through craving brings us a great deal of pain and misery. Craving is not fun. And so this is something that, you know, as it says here, alas, that I don't rid myself of pride. We need to rid ourselves of the suffering that comes from craving, which then comes from this self-centeredness or pride, this identification with self that really tortures us. And so ultimately, what is it that we need to do is we need to free ourselves from self-identity, from self-cherishing this identity. For once we free ourselves from this, we will have no suffering experiences. We will no longer experience those sufferings that are related to this self. And perhaps if someone else could read their translations of 178, 79.
Got the Wallace translation here. This awful impure form has its end in ashes and stillness, moved only by another. Why do I grasp onto it as mine? Of what use is this contrivance to me, whether it is dead or alive? What difference is there between this and a clump of soil and the like? Alas, you are not eliminating the grasping onto the I. And I've got the Bachelor. In the end, my body will turn to dust. Unable to move by itself, it will be propelled by other forces. Why do I grasp this unbearable and unclean form as I? Whether it lives or whether it dies, what use is this machine to me? How is it different from a clod of earth? Oh, why do I not dispel this pride of it being I and mine?
다 삼루야 보통 고도 아주 리데이지 네 리즈 시고 자첨부 지겨어데 다 힌두체 낭파체에서 메타게네 탈라서샤 거래
나
힌두다 낭파다 되기도 망체 메타게네 탈라서샤 거래 타마들라 주치리치리 야리야체다 자자자자 류망보지서는 다 타마들라 메타게다 탈라서샤 거래 다 가제레 되니 이슈레 다 줄우전다더니 서울 배샤 거래 양 타마다 탈인데 위자 되니지 탈라 차르고 거래 또 님보메겐지 차거도 와 데 인디갈 땅 아주 류센 탄다 류센디 이여베 갑들라 빼주야 뭐 있다네 저 치만 떤데 여바 지체투나 딜 야감이도
라
단데 류센디 여베 갑들라 단 따사와 거랑 여베 갑들라 빼줘 야부지 따네 개와 띠토니 개와 뚝지 아니 상기 사퍼던도야 아니 빼체 가서 여베 가나 미 가야 라 가야 되니지 제투나 약속도 때려도 차솔라 또서 님보ten 아니 젬벤 자주기 셈 니시 싸와 집이 장주기 셈데 가서 뚝뚝지 삼당과데 뺀 미스벤네 전부 차디어 다 인규란다.
So it all, as precious as we have held it, it all ends in ashes. And we should think well about that. And we should really practice. Because, in the end, depending on the different cultural or religious traditions, it all ends up in either being buried under the ground or burnt and turning to ashes, depending on the tradition of burial or cremation, etc., after death. And what do we do all through life? We treat it so special and we pamper it and we indulge it. And in the end, we see what, it's not so precious. We burn it or bury it, get rid of it. Other religions, although the actual practice of the religion during the time of life might be different, in the end, the body also becomes something to discard. And we think, it's burnt and it becomes, dark and crispy. In the end, it's black, dirty ash, not so beautiful, right? And this is the body, though, that we have. And we know that actually, and we should know that while we do have it, that we should put it to good use. We should really think about that, really put it to be good use it well, and be very diligent in all of the activities, virtues and good deeds that can bring us to the level of Buddhahood. And so therefore, really put it to good use, this body that we now have. And for actually also, we should understand that among all the different kinds of rebirth that we can take, or incarnations that we can take, that of the human body, a human existence, is the finest. And so now, while we have it, we have these different things that we can rely on for example, for relying on antidotes to undesirable states of mind. We can develop a way of being in the world that is very altruistic, focusing on benefiting humanity. We can use this body to develop a great mind of bodhicitta. And so these things, using it well in these ways, is really very vital. So maybe we take a little break here. Lasso culture and sama lapsong kishla.
Ta sumba mongpinge bas mongpa mishibata mongpa mishibatre mishibi kyonkare yoresi de tatela tele jindoa zangen lengi lekpada ngempa mishibe mongpa chiche
zangen di tampore di
lengi le mongpa lekpada ngempa yadu mishikin de mongpa tre ta lengi le mongpa zbi lengi machine kyonjiroa
oh lasso
Oni tome torada merani la eni pe mongne. Eni tora la eni pe torada mera shira gabuche de mera migache tora gabuche de mongpachi chadio date.
Okay.
Nipa. O te nipadre. Zopong de sumbare zopaponga tele zopaji kone zopapanya.
Zopapang.
Zopa.
Zopapang.
Dipet o zopong.
Oh.
That hey jipa de la lui le sepe nipa tumen june imba tajur la nimbu lawe chitu sunwar chawa asi lui de ne pe nipa tamche june de re de ina te thoni ta tal lui de tajur gi mili chade tajur gi mili ne di thone ne pe nimbu le yores Ding Nimbule Tontala te Sungure, the Tateji Jipadre. She was a Ketchamudua. Mazo Kerdo, the Kerdogen Laya, Chick Muni Pentoyore. Or that Tini in the Galape, Ketchamore. Ta Zord Tata, Palter Hatajamin Zord, something new.
And so now here we come to the end, in the next section that we're going to look at, we are nearing the end here of finishing this chapter on meditative concentration. And there are 4 sections that the verses kind of fit into expressing. And the first one, so these, again, so if we scale back to the broader outline of where we are now in the 3rd, looking at the faults of like ignorance or not knowing or just being in an unconscious state, being unconscious of something, unaware, unknowing. So we're in that 3rd section, and in that 3rd section there are 4 further subsections. And the first one is, and they all pertain to ignorance. And the first one is being ignorant of knowing what's good and what's bad. So not knowing right from wrong, just simply being ignorant of what's right and what's wrong. The second one are the faults of being ignorant when it comes to praise and blame. And so, in other words, falling into being someone who is so excited for, when they hear praise and completely dejected when they hear something unpleasant or blame. The third category within ignorance is to let down one's guard as far as patience goes, to kind of renounce being patient. And the fourth one is being ignorant in terms of understanding that this physical body is best used as something that can go about in this world to accomplish something purposeful, to accomplish something of great, the greater good, and something very purposeful, but something very like essential in this life, rather than letting it be used for like fault and craving and obsession and so forth. And so we'll look at those 4. And so these are, what we will study. And again, Geshe-la said, this brings us to the end, closing out this chapter.
Ta sholoka yeju padare lengi la momba ati karazena sholoka yeju tabu sungdwa lugi kata chebai teme lunga ngersanes jesu chatang kongchowa singtung dile jija sungdwa ta I di kare lugi kata chebai lui se I kyo sungdwa nevena I jegadwa I sidigala ikina ngaranzo yugi igi shepade sigore igi shepade nane tape rando ichi rando le janata ndigayo ran jinjin jenging ichi yorwa igi shepa ran jinjin jengi oda tigi pe lui la de kyogore lui de kyogore ran jinjin chejugorwa mangpoji oh kata chepai temme bedunga te dene pe di gondu zene temme bedunga mambuji sagdus peneme Jesus chabane contrôle sobatene tu mambuji karsa kyanje eni lui la ni semio maro lui koran pemporwa pempiranjinwa zurwa 제가 신나진지래 신도 총발에 되는데 류라니 잡아 지난 지금 잡아도 왜민도 와스 어다 두스니 숨도 다 문에 nembo shibusungu doate tigite di lengi la bomba lengi ta lui koran la shiba semme dugala lui koran le lengi shiki marwa ran chinzingi ti sem dige kare kolchi chi chagdo wata tesungo are
And so verse number 180, again, related to the ignorance of understanding things in a right way or in a wrong way. Where 180 says, through lavishing attention on this body, such sorrow I've brought myself so senselessly. What use is all my wanting, all my hating, for what indeed is like a log of wood? And so we need to see a distinction in these two things. We have the physical body, and then we have the mental aspect of our body, the mental aspect. And here in the mental aspect of the body, what we're speaking about is the mind and mentation that has the concepts such as, I need this, I want that, I want more of this, oh, if I could only get that. It really is, this all comes from our mentation. And from all this, all our wanting, from, either wanting things or hating things, what is it? This is something actually that the body doesn't do. Remember, the body is form. Form itself, this body itself doesn't want. It is the mentation. But the body, it's the mentation that has these wishes. It is the mentation that sees something as either good or bad. The body itself knows no good or bad. It is our own mentation, and what a great deal of suffering we create. This brings us, and all of this is created by the mind. We lavish it upon the body, but it is created by the mind. For as it says here, what use is all my wanting, all my hating? For indeed is like what is like a log of wood. And so this body is being compared to just a stump, a stump in the grass. Itself knows no good or bad, nor no wanting. It is our mentation that does that. And we have any other translation?
The Wallace. By favoring the body, one uselessly accumulates suffering. Of what use is anger or love to something equal to a piece of wood? And the Bachelor, having accumulated suffering for no purpose, because of my honoring and serving this body, what use is attachment and anger for this thing that is similar to a piece of wood?
Sheba day on the Galataco, Lucy than day on the Galatin, Torwa de Lego Mato, Pumpu Shankala Yomarwa. What that is in war, Shinzun de la Jazate. Ta Geju Keji Pategi, Tati Geju Tamba, Geju Banika, the Melamon, Tigi Chagdwa.
Karegi Mompa?
The Melamomba, Toradan, Lengila Mompa. Ta geji ba de ragin ditar kyambam tangazu be lui de shibu chedi kyangorwa lui choya ton tala be khalaza tulo kun twiyam ramira chigorwa oda de kyampai chago sogi zayang rungs ta thama de ani polena pumbo de chomne chebjin tangorwa ani chu churgore meta ge gore solo jugore ndaminda jigorota 오다 소기 손대는 라다 짐바트 지금 거래 저걸 속이 자경루 참에 제당 여민나 지드들라 잡을제스 제자 얘네 배 류코랑 원에 데라네 배 가서 잡아기 류코랑 원에 잡아게야 당 제당 제든데 요마르든데 누가 류라 같이는 아주 차고 그래스 오다 티스무다 티스 보네 야보도와 tal number 10은 돼요나 서로와요래 류 깡깡 답이 주 코나 란도니시나 줄로 서로와지기 요마르와 야하고 구도와 오다 15지 nembu도 티스 맞아 양양도 삼당고다 대마당 아주 류 제대지 란 진지 왕기지니 류지니 젠케트세야지 용구도와 강가 nga고 세마도 젠라 베트가 계수지기도와
And so next we will look at 181 and 182. 181 is related to, again, this ignorant of seeing things as like right or wrong, good or bad. And so here it says, whether I protect and pamper it, or whether it's eaten up by carrion birds, this body feels no pleasure, no aversion. Why then do I cherish it so much? And you know, so true. We do like so much for this physical body, for, you know, just this material body that we have. We want to give it delicious food. We want to buy certain fashion, certain clothes. We want to have certain, you know, like cosmetics. And, you know, we really take care of this body. And in the end, what happens? You know, it dies. It separates from its life force, and we give it to the birds. Whether we give it to the birds, sometimes it gets a burial at sea. Sometimes it's buried under the earth or the fire. But it doesn't really matter. In the end, it's discarded. And this body, as it says here, this body feels no pleasure and no aversion. Why do we cherish it so much? And what we have to understand is this physical body isn't the one that gets attached to those things, isn't the one that desires all of those things or crave those things. It's only when there is a consciousness in relation to this body that the feeling then arises. The body is the aggregate of form. It doesn't have perception. It doesn't have feelings. That comes into play when there is the consciousness, and then this consciousness can then make distinctions in feelings. But to the body itself, you know, there's no feeling of it liking something or not liking something, because when there's no consciousness in relation to a body, you know, no matter what happens to the physical body, there's no consciousness related that's perceiving that, then there are no like feelings then involved, no want, no liking and not liking, and so forth. But due to our mentation, for example, so why is it that we then, you know, have this feeling of I want this and I need that? Where does that come from? That comes from our own mentation, especially related to when we're identified very strongly with the self, and then wanting to be self-serving because we're self-cherishing. Naturally, we're self-cherishing, so we're very self-serving, while, you know, automatically we become indifferent towards others. We disregard others because we're trying to take care of ourselves and make sure everything that we have is going right. So that's where these feelings of, oh, I need this and I need that and I need this and I need that, that's where they come in. But they don't, this is again, the body doesn't have these feelings it is this like consciousness, especially one that is wrapped up in self-cherishing. So 181.
In the Wallace, whether it is nurtured by me or eaten by vultures, it feels neither affection nor aversion. So why am I fond of it? And the Bachelor, when I am caring for my body in this way, or whether it is being eaten by vultures, it has no attachment or hatred toward these things. Why then am I so attached to it?
오다 쇼로가 야당 여주까니 바데 뜨멜라 몽바스 다 디슨 거래 아 가지 몇 초다스 다데 나랑서데 마마미 슈주는 거다 미지기 메라다나 렘상 셈나 마기버 증거다 랑 진짜 로 진짜 하고라 나랑서 미지기 많이 가야지나 그래 안딜라선 라그로와 보다 될라고 하래 가지 내배 초와당 가지 뜻배 구르기 와세 다 가고 돌아다나 가보 구하게 아니 이란제 어때 큰아 빼 야부지랍 선삼네 용거로 그거 이란 집바르다 돼서 갈때 띵이 시메나 자기 칸랑 알와제스 다직 되는 배 유리 때니 이게 지금 가르소래 콜라는 배 시야기 니바디오 말이지 시야데 간가 셰랍게 시거래 시비 시거마도 이 유코란라 시거 말와 데니기 시야 매 인자 류라니 배 데니기 말와체다 데니체 맞베 데니체다 가르친 제고 그랬어 유코란군이 그거는 도와대 누서 삼다 간지 용야데 맞아 또저 란친디 온 거라 왔다가서 에 소소 서라다나 가보는데 샘드 란친디 제왕도 송동 gen지라 서라라 하장 가보 메라라 하장 미가 근처용 것도 란친디 슈체르다나 오 되니 란친디 슈체르 제 슈총당 옌친디 슈체르다나 오 단 인기를 공의 현대 통 인기리 나 현대는 여기를 삼삼지로마도 마가 용금도 아니 직 떨어다나 고 연대는 쇼 계산 로선 바기 바이올리코도 진짜요 연대는 셔바 빼야버리 세 삼당마도 디 소가 가보 게 시라기 란진이 오는 거 가능치 지제데 용마와 와다 계속 시라기 개발 첨버리 와다 직 진진진제나 들었다나 시라기 센다 니부차에 가서 왔다 이 아버지마다 셈나 캥발이 그 말와 왔다 그래서 개침버렸다 배 미스베 개침버려도
So 182 is a verse that is related to praise and blame, the ignorance of our reactions and interactions when it comes to praise and blame. And here the first line reads, resentment when it's reviled. This is so true. You know, think about it. When someone insults you, how do you feel? Someone, you know, really throws a great insult, you know, in your face, then how do you feel? Automatically, you feel resentment, you feel dejected, you feel averseness to this. You know, automatically there's a, oh my, you know, I mean, there's a visceral feeling when we receive, you know, negative words, criticism and so forth. And further on, or pleasure when it is esteemed. Neither of these two my body feels, so why do I exhaust myself? And so we look at our reactions. So we've talked about when someone insults us, automatically we are really averse and upset. And in this, also then when someone praises us, sings our praises, oh, we're pumped up, we're delighted, and we're like so flattered. Oh yeah, oh, little old me, but really we're delighted by this. And this isn't our body, it's like our body is not the one that got insulted and felt insult. Our body is not the one that felt flattered in delight. And seeing the difference or the right and wrong in this also isn't done by our body. That's done by our consciousness. That's done by our wisdom, awareness. This is done by our wisdom. And so again, it says, neither of these two my body feels. So, why are we exerting ourselves all the time to, when something comes up, to, really be, what's happening when this does come up? Well, due to, really cherishing our dear self, when someone says something nice, this feeds our ego and we feel pumped up and uplifted because our ego, we fed our ego. Our ego likes this, it's delighted. And in the same way, when someone says something not so pleasant, the ego is dejected and doesn't like that. And so what we need to do, again, this isn't the body, this is something that we're ignorant that's happening, and though it happens at a mental level, we're ignorant of it happening. So we've got to become aware of what's happening. So when we look to turn this situation around, when we are working to have our self-cherishing and really self-cherishing ego-centricness, really decline, and we're really working on that to really tamp it down and have this not be part of the scenario anymore. And also we're working to see the quality in others and really put our focus outwardly on others rather than always being the center of everything. Then when somebody insults us or points out something and says something negative, then we might consider, oh, do I really do that? Maybe that's true. Maybe I did that, or maybe I do that. We have to look within ourselves and see, oh, that's a possibility. Oh gosh. Maybe that's something I need to look at. And then when somebody, for example, points out something good about us, rather than like jumping up and down and getting, all about ourselves, we just look at it and say, oh, that's a good quality. That is something good to have. So hearing those words doesn't stroke our ego, but we do recognize a good quality, but we just don't have, we don't become arrogant or just, have this big swing of a mood about it. We just recognize a good quality. Oh, great. I guess that person saw me, for example, as patient. That's a good quality. And we leave it at that. And also, Janice, let's see, was that 182? I've forgotten. Yeah, I think so.
82. In the Wallace, if the body, which has no anger due to abuse, nor satisfaction due to praise, is unconscious, then for whom am I exerting myself? And in the Bachelor, if my body knows no anger when derided, and no pleasure when praised, for what reason am I wearing myself out like this?
That Sumbadre, Telezoba from Wasiare. Sholuka Yadang Geju Jasumbade. Kanji Lin Dungu Bas. That Dini Rashi Injinas. That lead and Dugia Kanji Suso Lidi Doba yo chinjila, di da nge lui segde, kangalan duguru wasi. Tamche rang lindobe, tela tako chimiga ase de sungda. Ta, chik, tende indikala, simchen tamche la rang lindoba jindu, ngao nyambade ngamngam shushu yongurode, yinayang rang lila hachang cheteche. Zengi lila magawa chegwade yomarese. Oda
Gonda ke shila yankir chek do
rang
yankir.
lila chajenjene.
Mm.
랑글릴라 차전전이 제리제야지당 젠길릴라 아니 메라데 리그마레스 젠길릴라 메라당야다 덴디 리그마레스
Really?
오다 랑글릴라 제리신도 젠라양 덴디 제리제과레 이제 다티 순거래 젠 진진 제과레서 순거래
Mm. Mm-hmm.
케스 제기와 마레스 순거래
Mm-hmm. Okay.
너 아주 그 거지진도 거니도 누구 봐주고 와
Mm-hmm.
오다 티주기와 마레스 순거래 돈 달라
Mm-hmm. Okay, so dene di zerpa dang kanda straight zerpa pachen druki zerpa pangwa
아?
di zerpa pangwa rebe
zupa 된다 무슨 디베트야 와
oh zerpa oh
미지근 디베트나 때려 zupa 찍어 와
that's okay go no top song okay zerpa okay so okay
간지 랑글룰라 디제 나진지 제리제 나진지 젠라 제리제 우레 젠라 제리제 고레 디페 젠라 메라타에 리그 마레즈데 따티 순거레
okay
데마다 란진진 슈총보 요네가 나나나 젠리 케드스 거와
yeah
와다트리
okay. And so in verse number 183, so going back, so a correction in number 3, it's not about patience, about letting down the guard of patience. It's about debating the points. So like debating the point. So a back and forth of like debate. And so verse number 183, if I say I do it since it's loved by other people, others whom I thus regard as friends, since all appreciate the bodies that they have, why do I not take pleasure in them too? So if I say I do it since it's loved by other people, meaning this form, I am pampering myself, lavishing myself, I'm doing all of these things for the purpose of others because they like it so much. Well, first of all, we have to understand that that's practically like, that's really not our experience. Most of the time, we center on ourself, our body, our so-called needs, while pointing fingers at other people, and we're always trying to get for ourselves, I need, I want, this is mine, my needs. And we're not doing that when it comes to others. But since all others also are in the same situation where they appreciate their bodies, the bodies they have, why don't we fixate on, and focus our efforts and attentions on, oh, they need this, they need that. Maybe it would be good if they had this. And actually, that's something that we need to do. Because what naturally happens when we create an environment around ourselves and that we are the center of, automatically we start disregarding others. They're not in, in that equation. We're indifferent to their needs. And so what this verse is saying is, don't be indifferent to the needs of others, but actually care about, their needs like you care for your own. And that's 183.
you want the other versions?
Yes. Yes.
Okay. The Wallace says, those who like this body are said to be my friends. They all like their own bodies too. So why do I not like them? And the Bachelor, but I want this body of mine. Both it and I are friends. But since all beings want their bodies, why do I not find joy in theirs?
다 지바데 룰레 세파 니바트모 중에 네인장 다절레 닝볼렘 비체도 숭어자와스 류드 숭구레즈다 지다는 다란진디 원도잖아 류디기 겐지니 니바망부지 용거와 대가서 통치스요 바래 뭐다 이나양 그 류데네 배 숭구레스 류데 타네네 개와투네 그 류데 장베철로 고추지네니 개와투네 상기 사포도로에 류덴디 톤 뚝뚝구레스 테티 숭고래 대외 자기 참에빠 다 야다 개죽게 지바데 대외 자기 참에빠 롤라 판지 류당자스 다베 소수 류데 아니 젠라 팽기나 차바베 톤에니 베 젠라니 베 류데 펜도군네 땅구레 스타데 양데 류당스디가라 베거디나 류라 주부지즈 숭고 마르다데 고고거래 가르다 밖에 계산 골런로서 니지 삼바 마타퍼 대다원나 류숭자 세데 계산 로서 공고라 니지 빼 류당두가라 니지 할레비 니지 톱 첨부 있나 니지게 미바 용수장데 톱 첨부 있나 디디 류당거마다 니지 삼바 빼 용수 마미말리 류당겨 말라 거래 되게 첨부래 왔다 때리긴 다 전에 펜바 갸침부터 랍침부여 된디 통고나 위대니 차바메가 지는 릴 땅고레스 되는 딜은 니망야 레기 제지 중월자스 왔다 위된 디 통에 란친지 왕도 지 로이나 디 견망부지 응고어데 이나양 디 견데 수수 하고 거네 애니베 셀지데 위데 또둥 숭고레스 다 지갑에 가상 지갑에 시진로서 때 빼미세베 야버다
Shigyapa gitsi kare la.
류는 라서 통매겨 대사로나 류숭자스 팀된 유린 소에나 텔레소나 망부jet스 팀단된 바다베 류 팀단된 바제 균도 최람들 남제 시랍기 따제제니 팀단 아니 최도 팀비 자와데 제딘 로이나 아니 류테 토니 소나몬부 벨기르스
Shigyapa nangla.
오 지갑아
Konda. Pelchena D3.
류는 라서 통매겨 대사로나 류숭자스 류라다 가서 란친지 왕도 송에 류들라 아니 베 제제제 견도 타이나 나나 진지 통구로와 견도 통구 가라 보다 된디긴 딘디 통구에나 류데 베 밤에도 건중만주 지기와 말아 류데 베 숭구레스 가르서는 그 굴주 야보지 저시나 아니 상기 사포던 로야다 아니 베 소남사야는 딘디기 겐체 투구레스 진짜 유는 좋아나 대외 소남 망부제스 다 최저도 남제 시랍기 아니 베팀 양다바지 랭인 제베 팀데 시바제네 니제베는 류데 빼 장베처럼 꼴네 디는 소남 망부 패러디 류토니다 차잘 꼬라갸 류토니 가와 망부제야도 어떻게 쓴 거래 오늘 깨치 모르다
And verse 184, where we look at this physicality and the in downfalls when it comes to attachment and craving, where it reads, Therefore, free from all attachment, I will give this body for the benefit of beings. And so first we well, first Geshe-la said that actually when it comes to attachment and craving in regards to our physical body, we we look at, due to having like this body, like all of the negativity that we can be involved in, all of like the negative actions that we can do and create in the situations that we can get ourselves into, that are very negative. And there are many like very examples that we can clearly see of this in our lives. We see this happening around us, that this body can create a lot of harm and misery, and and actually the condition that this harm and misery comes from is that we have physical bodies. That's what we trace it back to. And before that, self-cherishing around that, this body, this I that has this body. And so we must be very guarded with our physicality, and that we must make sure that all of our physical actions actually are aimed at virtue and aimed at, again, that goal of becoming enlightened beings, of reaching Buddhahood. And now we turn to the text where it says, therefore, free of all attachment, I will give this body for the benefit of beings. But we take pause here to remember, and we've discussed this before, that it is only out of a great compassion that is entirely absorbed in the benefit of others that we could ever really physically give this body. This is great compassion. It is under like an ordinary, like caring or just ordinary compassion. We are cautioned that it is not under ordinary compassion that we actually give our body, but under a great compassion. And so that's the only time that when we're under this great compassion, where we are completely absorbed in the benefit of others, that we could actually, without a care, give this body away. And further in this verse it says, and though it is afflicted by so many faults, I shall adopt it as my necessary tool. And so again, this body has faults. There are definitely some downsides, or some cons, we should say, but there are the pros as well. But we first must recognize those downfalls and see them and know them. And earlier there was this verse in Aryadeva's 400 verses that speaks to this, where it says that if one, through using their intelligence and wisdom, then can actually enter into the conduct that is very meritorious. But first we need to, and so we do this by adopting conduct that is in accord to the laws of right and wrong, that are in accord to right and wrong. And then we perfectly accomplish those things. And we have many options here. We have prostration, we have circumambulation, so many ways to virtue. But first we must use the intelligence that adopts right and wrong, what to adopt, what to discard, in accord with correct action and avoiding incorrect action that will be meritorious. And so we analyze, we use some rational analysis to look at our own self-centeredness. And as our Master Aryadeva said, when we rationally analyze the situation of self-cherishing, we will see it like our own enemy, and we must then be guarded in our actions. Just like donning good armor, the armor or protection that will see us to meritorious action, and that will be the condition of us to accomplish enlightenment, Buddhahood.
어다
And so
미스베 개침부도 어떻게 맞아 양양도 삼당거다 오늘 개침보래 맞아 초지부 삼당겨 말해 라진진 견제 삼당 대왕경에 녀몽되게 맞아 동안 가게 인진이도 뜻이 삼당거래 디네 동안 되게나 다 삼당의 라트네 तदो रांचिंजिन ला कैप्चर गुए ना सुसुन तो पर वामांग तो रवा तिनी दुंगल को पे या थाजे टेगरे रांचिंजिन की तिनी फाजो जेंचिंजिन से आदे ओने निशे सावाचेबे तापे निशे सावाचेबे एन जेंचिंजिन येंदें데 शिवो समतांग 거래 어 두스는 삼단에 네 진진진 콤펠돈도야 어 가서 툭툭 샘기 되기데 나란조 샘단에 에 가서래 미게베 샘데나 게베 샘이 링인 제시네 미게베 샘데 가서 툭툭디 마다마서나 자 뉴르당 게베 샘데 배 가서도 올 잡다마서나 갭네 가서 로로에네 야 콤펠도 파르투야 어다 두스 제와데 다 냐는기 쪼드 테레 데니 제와데 미스베 개침보래 데마도 라파 탕아 침보 이렇게 아니 나다 사는데 아니 마니라사 셈날은 기와 만로나 아니 팽겨 말이 팽겨 말이 어도 두수 삼삼 땅기 아니 나 땅기 난다 덤반 덩기 난다 고라 고르기 난다 차세기 난다 만데 고르기 나 티 만데 ene pugi na te so kanga gop yanta ban rugure te misibe ya bore ma chu jetan de shegu do a jetan ma shin be gyondu a
And so to really think about using this physicality in as a tool in such a way for virtue to really kind of like a tool, armor and a tool to to accomplish virtue and enlightenment. And this is really important to think about, and these are also very, very important practices to adopt and to adapt our lives to. And really think about it. Think about how has your self, cherishing, how has your egocentricness in the past served you? How much suffering has an afflicted mind brought you? Really think about that. And if you want suffering, if you like it, well, then great, because a self-serving, self-cherishing attitude will get you all of the unhappiness and suffering that you want. You could probably perfect that and get very unhappy very fast. But that's not what we're talking about here. In all seriousness, what we're looking to do is to adapt in a way where we adopt attitudes of focus on others, goodwill for all, and the very root of beautiful compassion. That's what we're adopting. Really caring about others. That's what we're thinking about. And as we adopt these things, actually, we'll become more habituated, and they will further and further increase. They will really, increase and grow and develop. And so when it comes to developing behaviors that will bring us peace and happiness in our mind, then we got to break up with non-virtue. We got to really work to separate from it, to have it decreasing. And really, we really want to break this cycle of non-virtue, and we want to increase and support the cycle of virtue and goodness to create and, its development. We really want to support that. That's the practice. It's not about, whether you put on a mala on your wrist or recite mantra, say the mani mantra. If you're doing those things, but there's no transformation and change, evolvement happening within the mind, then, this isn't the practice that, that's not what gets us there. Generally speaking, though, so that alone, that isn't what does the transformation. We've got to concentrate on virtue and really look to, to break from non-virtue. But that being said, of course, it is very virtuous to, the virtuous activities are indeed to say mantras and recite prayers and to meditate and circumambulate and say the mani mantra, make offerings and so forth. Generally speaking, indeed, these are virtue.
Yeah,
and so I think we need, that's Shua Geshe-la. Janice, I think you need to read 184. Okay.
Therefore, with indifference, I have given up my body for the benefit of the world. Hence, although it has many faults, I keep it as an instrument for that task. And therefore, in order to benefit all beings, I shall give up this body without an attachment. But although it may have many faults, I should look after it while experiencing the results of my previous actions.
Simkin Rothade, Pe Gaming Rothade, she was she was the Pe Ketchimbudwa.
Gedang Megewa.
Oh, Gava the Migu, Gasen, the Migu, Semgi, Nami to the Shigwa, the Misu Ketchimbori. Migu Semji, Gula Ketchingela, Lui Gipe, Karswari, Juma Kona Tujugur, two edge Argudwa. Give Semji Gula Yena, Lui the Pe, Lushishi, Jenny. Any pay talk for you to the Yabo, any pay some Lujana, some Yabu Kurgrua. Keeper Chimbore. Jarmuchipe, young to Smuda. Pay not the Semgi, Dothan the Yabuj machine, pay Cabore. That then on a number in the Yaman Chekeji, didn't Dothan the machina. Didn't pay Missive Cabore. Yundu Samdang, so any pay Semdala, Yundu Charachi, Yundu Shudatang, or sending you move on the Rudu Mindo, and it Teratan to Kandeji, so Samla Kandiungudu, Meratan to Kandiungudu. This one number Sora Kimbo Chagona, Tata, Dego Mare. What a team, that co Dilapap, any Namjiton to any Sem the Hajang, 2 mena. Then it seemed the really Toratana Shra Gajan Chamomendagain. The Meratana Shira Nobomendagain, then you in the Tandigore, Nampagi, Tal Sugor, the mother Kaburda. Nampenyaman passing in the Bear Kabore. What are the indigo Gundu, Semla, Charachawa, the Penisiba Ketchambore. So the Kibuyung Guyana send the Gavism to Katanga. Kaza to do Pemisive Ketchamber, that a Chishon and Chishore. That's that could the Tasholokasuma the Lele or Mare. And it's a subject Jiba the Enipe. Same you want to Jabase that Sholoka Tila subjects Shologre subject into the Ta have the Jamade Yongri. The Nita was a pair Taxagilan do or Diane. 강할로는 빼자 야볼로 마도 셰럽 길리우디 빼 미시버 탁보래 가보래
아니 용규기 식제디 가래기 컬러레 가래기
셈경원도 섭제 지바 셈경원도 제바즈디요
샘기 원도 제바
섭제 지요 계산 바진 제니 바진 제니 저we 냠술em 베셀 셈원도 제바텔라 지와 고파기 네 차르제 베출 란든 바지 저we 니미 루이기 셈 루이기 네발라 타파 셈경원도 제바즈 다지바 셈경원도 제바데 다 용주들이
so 샘기 원도 제바 세나
다 수수 셈지어와 셈디기 애니 게베초라 카타이나 카레용구야 단다 셈디 뇨모 촐리기 견제네 루이기 니미다디 휴망부지 테셰라와 당원에 상이 용주되나 답에 내가 침보래 딱 그상의 여름치 내딜은 따게도 저와 냠랭 외마들에서네 네 따게도 티닝이 가서 툭툭지 갸르다 저거데 또 빼게 첨버데도 양양도 로나 빼 미시버 펜도 용그래 지르나 전주 용수 조바르데 데만다 데나니 로종웨즈데 쇼로가 야당이 슈셉지니 좀데 벤주 조자버도 다 다쟁냠제기 냠는 거마 제데 숭고아래
아니 식제 야당
니슈스 셉지바 생아니
몰라서
야당 니슈 생아바데
류디낭라
라
류디낭라
류디낭라 something 기류기
something gilu okay porque pelcher ani tap shandakla samsam angtrang ani kakare porque tonne gyadang nishu
생아바 갈때 찐나 지지자 라든 삼반데이출 갈때 찐나 지지자 젠든 삼바 라이치 시에데 타티니 베 냠는 거마도 주고 다시 냠저기 냠는 거마도 뛰는 거 주고 아래
올라서 오레레레 야 차도
어디 마음 야네양도 배잘로 야네양도 삼당한테 배 수수semla 팽기리 펜부중한데 야버로 여름지 씹을 수도
And so it's very, as practitioners, it's crucial that one understands the inner mechanics of the mind, the inner mechanics of mentation, how your mind works. And, really, as it pertains to virtuous states of mind and non-virtuous states of mind. Really understanding, for example, when you're in a non-virtuous state of mind, when you're afflicted, under, waves of great affliction, to see and understand that upset, that internal upset, mentally and physically, when one is in the state of a negative emotion, this affects us physically. This affects us at a physical level. Negative mental states affect us in a very, like a way that really brings us down, brings our immunity down. It really affects us even at a cellular level. And at the same time, or in the same way, virtuous mindsets, think about how you feel when you're filled with love or compassion. And actually, these boost our immunity. This brings positive, like vibration, if we can use that word, energy to the body. His Holiness the Dalai Lama is constantly speaking about this, and also saying that, you know, for us to make progress on the path, if we don't understand the inner workings of the mind, will be very difficult. And His Holiness is always saying that we must understand the inner world of our mind. And as Buddhists, really there's just no other way for us to practice and make progress unless we know, like, the mechanics of our mind, and we're turned inward to examine those and understand those. We must be able to understand what comes over us when we're afflicted, what happens to our inner world when we're tormented by an affliction, by a strong negative emotion. We must be able to look and see within ourselves what happens to us under the sway of negative emotion. What happens to you when you're flattered and praised? What happens to you when somebody degrades you or insults you? What's your feeling like? What happens there? What happens in the inner world? And what we come to know is that if we can't right ourselves to balance, if we are disturbed by a negative thought, if we are dejected by an insult, we won't be balanced. Our mind will be upset. Our mind will be in flux, whether we're feeling flattered or dejected. And if we're still under the sway of these things, like unbridled, then it'd be very hard to really train, in the Buddhist techniques, if we don't understand these mechanics and if we don't see it going on. And so you should always examine the state of your mind, and always, like, urge yourself on. If you want happiness, then you have to urge yourself on to virtue. Basically it all comes down to that. And so there are only three verses remaining. And the three verses that are remaining are a focus on like what happens to a mind that is under the influence of something, an emotion or a thought. And this is the fourth of a category, like one of the major root categories that we have been looking at. The fourth one, which is a mind, consciousness that is under the influence of being influenced. And so we're going to look at that next. That's what happens very next when we meet next week. But actually, then after that, we're going to, we will have culminated, this chapter will be over, and we will have reached the chapter on wisdom, which is actually, quite a difficult chapter. And, it is really, a very, very involved chapter. And so first, though, we look at a mind under the influence of something such as, for example, the mind when it is relaxed. How, is that, what are the mechanics? A mind that has affliction, what are the mechanics there? But in any event, we are, we're going to reach the wisdom chapter, and Geshe-la is saying that it would be very prudent to go back and read up until this point again, or it's going to be difficult. So we should reread what we have done so far, and really, focus again on what we've already covered, and especially in this chapter. verse 125. So in the chapter on meditation, so we have the preliminary verses and the actual, like when kind of where the rubber really meets the road, starts at 125 in the 8th chapter. We could go back as far as this chapter is concerned and focus there. So again, before we're going to end there for today. And yes, do go back and review Geshe-la advices.
Yeah, that 내가 자네 계속 좋아해 봤다. 잠깐만 조금만 더 두 번 진도 찍어도다.
라서. 네, 두서 연아 Geshe-la 개랑라.
나다 그 개민도.
Okay, questions? Anyone?
수티와 메나 좀발해야 걸로 같이도 세고 쓰와.
라서.
네. 니 전주나라 코란라 좀발해야 주 monsim chogelenya da judum chogelenya jusum monsim da jusum 니가 chogelen사 카가 요건 지다 진규제 지 니용도 된디가 monsim 신디가 런데게 삼바르바 상기사 런데게 삼바 다 주dom제데 친두고 자외진네 아니 네 친두 냠슬레미 자외진네 아니 너의 자와 지진바데 답에 딜라거로 백 개침보래
디죽돔
된주dom래 어다때 인디가라 네 초가데도 리디지 디니 슈니 구르고 아니 키 콘사탄다
라소 데 Geshe-la shia chikla ngoma ani kecha triken kandre shuken William Seria di dering mendok
라
ngoma ani kirangi loma chiki kirangla de kola kandre shusong ring kong mendo
맨나 개케요 말에
laso and so
दूसरे दे इंदिगाला 상기 최소만 강갈은 누구라 상기 최소만 누나 무슨 남자 전티니스 딩은에 초갈렌 두고래 무슨 남자 전키 두고래
수연나양
상기 최도 소그 전함라 전주 보도 다니게 나기서 김에 사람게 롤라 판지 상기 누버셔 저데 땡기 중라더니 살숨든 아니 타마 아니 배 숨비더라 롤라 펜치 상긴 루버쇼 시드갈랑에 귤라만 선탐제진 계속 산데 삼로도 코르고 와
올라서
어두 시드 삼로 거는더니 굴레굴레니 monsem tam자지 케더니 monsem 케더니 주셈 기그와
디 무셈기 초가낭셰
monsem 기 초가나죠 monsem tam자진다 monsem 기주도 다 걔네 지마룬 냠다 땡리기 monom 수도 중요야 돼
올라서 so if there aren't any questions, then Geshe-la said that he would like to discuss a little bit on taking Bodhisattva vows, and that's something also that came up last week, taking Bodhisattva vows. And so there is, both aspiring bodhicitta and, application bodhicitta. And so, these two can, they can be taken separately, they're distinct. So in one way of taking them, they're taken separately and distinctly. And we can understand the difference between taking the Bodhisattva vows of aspiration bodhicitta and application bodhicitta in this way. So aspiration bodhicitta is the desire. It's aspirational. This is when one forms the resolute aspiration to aspire to Buddhahood, to aspire for enlightenment for oneself. And that's aspiration bodhicitta. And then as far as application bodhicitta, this is when we're really applying the activities that accomplish that aspiration. We're really taking up the activities. So we're applying ourselves. So application bodhicitta. Now, when it comes to, so one of the ways that you yourself can have these vows, the Bodhisattva vows. So first, let's look at aspiration bodhicitta, aspiring bodhicitta. And then one can recite the words of refuge in generating bodhicitta, which we have in our opening prayers, where it says, until enlightenment, I go for refuge to the Buddha, Dharma, and Sangha by the accumulation of the practices of giving and so forth. May I become a Buddha to benefit all sentient beings. So you recite that 3 times, and on the 3rd time through, when it comes to the words, may I become a Buddha to benefit all sentient beings, that's the essence of aspiring bodhicitta. You are aspiring to enlightenment for the benefit of all beings. That in that instant, when you say that 4th line, the 3rd time, then you think, I now have the vow of aspiring bodhicitta, of aspiration bodhicitta. And so that's how you take the vow.
장동대 땡기로는 기기어레서와 어서 땡기로는데다 빼빼기 덤비고 예매 개발이 엄마래 상기매베 사저 매라래 상기매베 사저 균이 엄마래잖아 남그 터도 기르바 지담바 심지말리 타양 대진 온스 승도 남가 가르케블라 심진 캐벨 심진 가르케블라 상기 캡디어레스
올라서
뭐다 늘지나 눈이나 늘레레다나 수수 매봤잖아 상기 여레스 강라 매바 소셔와 띠당도 두바 주들 어때 니가라 수수 매비죠 맞아지래 매비죠나 상기 치좀 곧 뉴뉴지나 때 돈다 장주기 있는데 몰람 수도 중요해요래.
And so in this prayer that, you know, we say, we are now taking up the vow through prayer. And it's also said that when we take up the vows of, when we take vows, then we do it in the presence of some kind of a representation of the Buddha. And so that could be a tanka or a statue or so forth. But if one doesn't have any of these, it makes no matter, because there's nowhere where the Buddha is not. The Buddha pervades like the sky pervades, like space pervades. Wherever there is space, there are Buddhas. So there are always Buddhas. So if you don't have a physical representation, a picture or a tanka, then it is of no matter, because the Buddhas pervade all of space. And so one then visualizes taking, like saying this prayer and receiving the vow in the presence of the Buddhas, the all-pervading Buddhas. Dene juktom len tap ani
tam 어떤 네 그런 당봉에 저가도 뛴 끌고
Oh, lasso. So actually right
아니
now
가서 주고 양님의 뒤쳐도나 양때 버를 하다지나 저갈렌다 사지잖아 개견민도 내셔
Oh, lasso. And so Geshe-la is saying that he will now offer the vows. He will now then proceed with this ceremony and actually offer the vows using like this prayer and this ritual for us all now at this time.
문에 손음만 보사거다. 근데 문선 담자진 상기 추소 먹는 렘바이나 뭐 손음 랍침 보사거. 이 여름에 상기 추소 먹는 문선 담자진 망부 남기도. 근데 땡기 좀도 낸저데 양년도 가는 것도. 이 차균데 번에여고 오마 간사도지 창설데 공기 차균제 쓰기도. 어다 인디가라 솔메겨지 말해 솔여겨지래 여겨도 인데 땅가서 나랑서 때바 영연지 때리지바 있는 수소 펜도 연구로 와 요게 장섬 소보렌네니 children mi controlangena oh tate a버지 니들이 돈발린 삼삼제데 양직 디 돌아 파 늘린 늪만 잘지 양직 쇼구도 되게 돼 어때서 펜더요래 펜더 매기는 말해
라소. 아니 프네 아니 라마기 센 도제창
가상도지창
가상.
계질링을 붙여다 티장을 붙여 고란조 라마래
Oh, lasso. So also when we take the Bodhisattva vows, this is a deed that is extremely meritorious, really extremely meritorious. The mind that aspires to bodhicitta is just incredibly, really powerful. And sometimes it is given, like His Holiness teaches about it being like given in the presence of a representation of the Buddha. However, like a more formal ceremony, but when His Holiness gives the vows, he returns to this like ceremony using these very words: until enlightenment I go to refuge, Buddha, Dharma, Sangha, by the accumulation, and so on. These the ones that Geshe-la has just recited. This is the one His Holiness uses all the time. And again, His Holiness also says that it is extremely powerful merit, powerful, strong merit. And again, the origin of the tradition of taking the Bodhisattva vows in this way can be traced back to the teachers of His Holiness's tutors. So in particular, Khaosang Dorje Chang. And so, for someone to take these vows with great trust and faith, this is receiving these vows through trust and faith is, can bring about such benefit. For example, like, the mind of bodhicitta is like a powerful thing. We might be out and about in some situation, we're triggered, someone around us gets angry, and instead of reacting, we then think, I'm someone who has taken vows, and I must, not react, and I must not in turn get angry. So we see the benefit that taking the vows can really present us.
Yeah, 다 주도 두바진선다. 계속 한 비문하게 얘기래.
So maybe now your knees are getting a little bit, maybe now you're getting sore. Your knees hurting.
Yeah, 다 당화지고라.
Okay. So
당화지도 뺏게 쳐버렸다. 당화지도 갈았다. 오니 조장 간지가 사샤게 배 모셔고 와래. 배션 뱅을 쫄다 집어랬다. 뱅을 디포짓 줘도 줘다. 디포짓면 뻥구르고는 꿈에 끼어 잡아 끼었더니 지금 와.
라, 건다.
배샤. 단다 가서 뭐제데 배션 뱅을 디포짓 줘다 잡으레스.
Oh, lasso.
배샤 먹고는 주니잖아. 구마 잡아들이 킨루로.
ngokang nangla ani pechati
무간을 주샤나 콘데샤그로.
really
어디 뭐제데 틴다버리.
Okay, lasso ani dene Geshe-la kerang maumpala dene dompa di ani sugere ani
당분이 domba 렌산 레루 참아 셰고로.
lasso dene
장동네 개발해요 말에. 장동네 물라 domba 말레 물레 셰나 디고래.
lasso yang maumpala kerang mixelgi choga dinangshin consola ani
그다 주고 뒤에 장로나 나가서 뒤 저쪽으로 와.
lasso. And so Geshe-la is just clarifying that in the future, if there's time for him to, kind of do a formal ceremony of offering these vows, like we can set a time, like for this, that would be appropriate, then he can bestow the vows. But what he thought that he would do here, even though there's nothing saying particularly that you must have an explanation ahead of time. He thought he wanted to give a little background towards where the ceremony, the tradition of where the ceremony came from, and a little bit of the meaning of the two different ceremonies of aspiration and application, bodhicitta. So in the future, maybe we can make a time for that, and he can bestow those vows. But now we're going to dedicate, where it's almost 6, and we're going to dedicate the merit here. Because dedicating the merit is like protecting your investment. We take our hard-earned money and we put it in the bank so that it won't be stolen or lost. And in the same way, we dedicate our merit, this precious investment of, we protect our precious investment of merit by dedicating. And so now we'll do our dedication prayers. La ngato di
tanda gawa samena mishima sayona gawa de kondu michomia dondala benle chugo dan rabuchi gores kondu tumtumar de kondu chena.
And so if there weren't any investment to protect, we wouldn't be needing to do this. But there is an investment to protect. It's our virtue. And if we have virtue and then suddenly we become angry or get into like some kind of a heated quarrel and there's anger or hatred, then that virtue is gone. The virtue is lost. And therefore we do have an investment to protect. And so we dedicate.
Chanjo semjo rimboche make pana kengurchi kewa nyamba mepaya kone kondo pewara so ari rave kurwe jinkampe pendant malin juene chereze wan tenzin gyat shape site parto tengurchi jambal pawe chiltare kembatan kundu zampo teante teta kungeji soda loche gawande ta thamje rabtu ngo tusum shepe gyawa tham Bodhicitta,
the excellent and precious mind, where it has not been born, may it arise. Where it has been born, may it not decline, but ever increase higher and higher. And the land encircled by snow-white mountains, the source of all happiness and benefit, flows in your person, Chinmazig. Tenzin Gyaltso remain until samsara ends. Just as the Bodhisattva Manjushri obtained omniscience and did Samantabhadra too, so now I dedicate these merits to train and follow in their footsteps. As all the victorious Buddhas of the past, present, and future praise dedication as supreme, so now I too dedicate these sources of my merit for all beings to perfect good action.
Thank you.
Thank you, Geshe-la.
Thank you.
Thank you, Geshe-la.
Thank you. Everybody, thank you.
Everyone,
Thank
take
you.
good care. Be safe.